The widow in shadows, the galaxy was silent after the war. Planets burned and fleets were broken. Among the ruins walked a lonely widow, carrying her small child close to her chest. Her husband had died in the great battle, his ship swallowed by fire, leaving only memories. Her people turned their eyes away from her, whispering cruel words behind her back. They said she brought bad luck, that a woman without a husband was cursed. No family wanted her. No warrior dared to stand near her. The widow was not just alone, she was unwanted. She wandered through the crowded markets, her child holding her hand tightly. They begged for scraps, but even merchants pushed them aside. "Go away, cursed one," they hissed. "No one will ever take you." The widow kept her head low, tears burning in her eyes, but her child, too young to understand shame, only whispered, "Mother, I am hungry." At night, they hid in the shadows of broken temples. She wrapped her child in thin cloth, whispering songs of comfort. Her heart ached, not for herself but for the small life who looked up at her with hope. She prayed to the stars, though she no longer believed they listened. One night, when the child was asleep, the widow sent a secret signal into space. Her voice was broken as she spoke. "If anyone hears me, please. My child deserves life." Her people would never forgive her if they knew she asked strangers for help. But she had no choice. Far across the stars, in a human outpost on the edge of known space, a man sat alone. He was a cargo worker, simple and quiet. He had seen battles too, but from afar, moving supplies to keep soldiers alive. One night, as machines hummed, he caught a broken signal on his console. He leaned closer, listening. The voice was tired, filled with sorrow. A woman begging for her child. The man froze, the sound cutting into his chest like a blade. He remembered Earth's history. Widows crying after wars. Orphans searching for food. He closed his eyes, hearing his grandmother's voice from long ago. Humanity never abandons the broken, never forget that. And so, his heart was decided. The widow, unaware of who had hurt her, continued her life of shadows. Every day was survival, every hour a struggle. Her child grew thinner, yet still smiled, still held her hand with trust. Sometimes she thought of ending the suffering, walking into the deep rivers of her world. But then the child would laugh at something small, like a bird in the sky, and she knew she must endure still. The weight of rejection crushed her spirit. No prince, no warrior, no villager wanted her. She was a ghost among her own kind. Then one day whispers spread through the market. "Humans are coming," they said, their voices sharp with fear. The widow's heart raced. She had never seen a human, only heard rumors. Her people claimed humans were dangerous, ruthless and wild, but deep inside a small spark of hope flickered. Could it be that someone had heard her cry? Could it be that the stars had not abandoned her after all? That night, as she lay with her child in the shadows, she stared at the sky. She saw a light moving across the stars, brighter than the rest. Her child pointed with small hands and whispered, "Mother, look, the star is coming to us." She pulled the child close, tears filling her eyes for the first time in many years. Her heart beat with something new. Not fear, not shame, but hope. The widow in shadows did not know it yet, but the story of her life and her child's life was about to change forever, because humanity had heard her and humanity always answered. A human listening on the far edge of known space, a human outpost floated in silence. It was not a great station of power, only a cargo hub where ships came to load supplies. Here worked a man named Aaron, simple in duty but strong in spirit. He was not a soldier, not a commander, only a worker who moved crates and fixed machines. Most called him unimportant, a man who would never be remembered in history. But fate often chooses the quiet ones to change everything. Aaron lived alone in a small metal room, walls covered with old pictures from Earth. There were images of oceans, mountains, and children playing in green fields. He would stare at them at night, dreaming of a world full of warmth, far different from the cold silence of space. His console beeped quietly most nights, only messages of trade or supply schedules. But one night the sound was different. Broken, weak, desperate. He leaned forward, adjusting the dials, and then he heard her. A voice cracked with sorrow, whispering words in broken Galactic common. "If anyone hears me, please. My child deserves life." Aaron froze, his hands trembling. He replayed the signal again and again, each time feeling the pain inside her voice. It was not just a message, it was a cry from the heart. He heard the child's faint sound in the background, coughing softly. That small sound cut through Aaron's chest like a blade. He remembered the wars of Earth. His grandfather had once told him stories of widows crying on ruined streets, children wandering hungry through ashes. And he remembered his grandmother's words. Humanity never abandons the broken. Never forget that. Aaron knew the station commander would never approve. To them, aliens were business, not family. Helping an alien widow meant nothing to trade or profit. But Aaron was not thinking of trade. He was thinking of the child's cough. The broken mother's plea, he whispered to himself. I cannot ignore this. He spent the next hours searching the signal, tracing it through static. Through scattered transmissions, finally, he found its origin. A world scarred by war, it was known as Vera, a place where old empires had fought and left only ruin. Few traveled there, for its people were bitter and cold. Aaron stared at the map, his heart heavy. Everyone said it was dangerous, but deep inside, he felt something stronger than fear. A quiet voice whispering, Go, they need you. The next morning, Aaron stood before his superior. I want leave, he said. His voice steady. The officer laughed, shaking his head. You? Leave this post for what? Another worthless adventure? Aaron answered simply, For life, for a widow and her child. The room grew silent. The officer scowled. Humans risk for humans. Not aliens, he snapped, but Aaron only whispered back. Family is not only blood, it is choice. With no support, Aaron sold his small savings. He borrowed an old freighter, patched with rust but still flying. Others mocked him, calling him a fool. Why risk for a stranger who does not matter, they said. But Aaron only tightened his jaw and whispered, Because she matters, her child matters. The journey was long. Stars passing like silver rivers outside the window. Aaron sat in the cockpit, replaying the broken message again and again. The widow's voice filled the silence, each word a promise to himself. He imagined her hiding in the dark, child clinging to her side, no food, no safety, only fear. And each time he thought of stopping, her words pushed him forward. Please, my child deserves life. At last the ship broke through the clouds of Vera. Aaron saw a world covered in ruins, cities half-burned, skies gray with ash. He guided his freighter down to the markets where life still clung. People stared at him, their alien eyes cold and unwelcoming. Whispers spread quickly. A human here. Children hid behind their mothers. Soldiers watched with suspicion, but Aaron walked calmly, carrying only a small pack of food and medicine. He was not here to fight. He was here to answer a call. Somewhere in the shadows of that ruined city, the widow stirred. Her child coughed weakly as she wrapped him tighter in her arms. She looked up as voices rose outside. They say a human has come. One woman hissed. The widow's heart stopped. Her people feared humans, called them ruthless. Unpredictable, dangerous. But deep inside a spark of hope flickered. Could it be him? Could it be the one who heard her cry among the stars? Aaron walked deeper into the streets. He did not know where she was, but he knew she was near. And as he stepped into the shadowed alleys, two lives, the widow and her child, waited for the moment their world would change forever. First meeting, the marketplace of Vera was loud with voices. But when the human stepped into its heart, silence spread like a wave. Aaron walked carefully, his boots echoing on the cracked stone. Every alien eye followed him, filled with suspicion and fear. Some muttered curses. Others moved their children away. Humans were rare here, almost myths told in hushed tones, and now one stood among them, carrying nothing but a small pack. The widow stood at the edge of the crowd, her child weak in her arms. She pulled her cloak tighter, trying to remain unseen. Her people whispered harshly around her. Do not let him near, one said. He will bring danger, another spat. The widow's hands trembled, but her heart pounded with a strange rhythm. Could this human be the one who had heard her broken plea? Aaron's eyes scanned the faces. Most turned away, unwilling to meet his gaze. But then he saw her, a figure half hidden in shadow. Her clothes were torn, her face pale, her child clinging to her. The child coughed weakly, a sound that pierced through the crowd. Aaron froze because he knew that sound. He had heard it in the message. He had followed it across the stars, and now he had found them. Slowly he stepped forward, ignoring the angry stares. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small container, food warm and simple, and a flask of clean water. He held it out, not too close, his movements gentle. The widow stiffened, ready to turn away, but then her child lifted his head, eyes wide. The boy pointed at the human and whispered, "Mother, he is kind." The widow's throat tightened. She shook her head, whispering, "No, we cannot trust him." Her people had filled her with fear, stories of humans as destroyers, but Aaron did not argue. He simply lowered himself to one knee. He placed the food on the ground between them, and then softly he spoke, "You are not unwanted." "Not to us," the words hung in the air. Heavier than stone, the crowd hissed, muttering louder. How dare he speak to her? She is cursed already. And now she speaks to a human. But Aaron ignored them, his eyes steady on the widow and child. The boy's small hand tugged at his mother's sleeve. His eyes begged silently for her to take the food. The widow's heart broke at the sight. She had nothing left to give. Nothing left to lose. With trembling fingers, she reached out and took the flask. She lifted it to her child's lips, watching as he drank greedily. The boy sighed with relief, whispering, "It is clean." "Mother," Aaron smiled faintly, though his own throat ached with dryness for the first time. The widow looked at him fully. She saw no weapon, no greed, no mockery. Only tired eyes filled with something she had not seen in years. Compassion. The crowd began to murmur louder. A guard stepped forward, sneering. "Leave this place, human. You have no business here." Aaron rose to his feet slowly, standing tall though he was alone. "I have business where life needs saving," he said firmly. The guard's eyes narrowed. Hand on his blade, the widow gasped softly, clutching her child tighter. But before violence could spark, the child spoke again, his small voice cutting through the noise. "He is not bad, he helped me." The guard paused. Uncertain, the market stilled, silence wrapping around them. And in that silence, the widow felt something stir inside her. For years she had been told she was cursed, unwanted, forgotten. But here stood a human, a stranger from far away, offering her dignity, food, and hope. No price, no demand, only kindness. Her lips trembled as she whispered, Why would you help us?" Aaron's voice was steady, though quiet, because no mother and child should be abandoned. The widow's eyes filled with tears she had held back for too long. Her heart wanted to believe. But fear chained her. Could she trust him? Could she let herself hope again? The child, innocent and pure, made the choice for her. He reached out his tiny hand toward Aaron. Smiling weakly, Aaron knelt again, gently taking the boy's hand. That single touch broke through the walls of fear and rejection. For the first time in many years, the widow felt warmth, and she whispered to herself, "Perhaps the stars have not abandoned us after all." Trials of trust. The days after the first meeting were heavy with tension. The widow still lived in the shadows, but now there was a man who visited her. A human who carried food, clean water, and sometimes even small medicines. The child smiled more, his cough grew lighter, and his eyes began to shine again. But the people of Vera did not smile. They whispered in anger, calling the widow a traitor. They said she was shameful for accepting help from an outsider. They spat on the ground when Aaron passed by. Yet he did not answer with anger, only calm eyes and steady steps. The widow's heart was divided. Part of her feared what her people would do. She had seen them cast stones before at others they called cursed. But another part of her felt something new, something she had almost forgotten, hope. Each time Aaron looked at her child with kindness, she felt her walls breaking. Each time he spoke gently to her, she felt warmth in the cold emptiness of her soul. Yet still fear whispered in her ear, "Do not trust him, he will leave." Like all the others, one morning the marketplace was crowded. Aaron walked beside the widow carrying a small basket. Inside were fruits from faraway worlds, bright and fresh. The child giggled, holding one in his hands as if it were treasure. But as they moved through the market, a group of young warriors blocked the way. Their armor was sharp, their eyes cruel. One of them sneered, pointing at the widow. "They're the cursed one," he spat. "And look, she walks with a human." The crowd gathered quickly. Voices rose, filled with hate and mockery. "She has betrayed her blood." "She is lower than dirt," Aaron stepped forward. Standing between them and the widow, his voice was steady, calm but strong. "She has done nothing wrong, leave her be." The warriors laughed. "Why do you protect her, human? She is nothing." Aaron's jaw tightened, but he did not move aside. "She is a mother and he is her child." "That is everything," he said firmly. The leader of the group shoved him. Go back to your world, human. Before you bleed here, the widow gasped. Clutching her child, she wanted to run, but her feet would not move. Her heart pounded as she waited for violence. Aaron stood tall, his eyes never leaving the warrior. He did not raise a weapon, but his presence was unshaken. Then, in a sudden move, the warrior lunged at the child. The crowd gasped, but Aaron moved faster. Blocking the strike with his arm, pain shot through him. Blood dripping from the cut, yet he did not fall. He pushed the warrior back with a single blow. The child cried out, clinging to his mother. Aaron turned, his voice calm even in pain. You will not touch them. The market froze in silence. The warrior stepped back, surprised that a human would bleed for an alien widow. The crowd whispered in confusion. They had expected fear, weakness, or retreat. Instead, they saw strength born not from hate but from love. The widow's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever stood for her. No one had ever protected her child, yet this human, a stranger, had chosen to. That night, Aaron's arm was bound with cloth. The widow cleaned the wound with shaking hands. Her child sat close, watching with wide eyes. You are hurt because of us, she whispered. Guilt heavy in her voice, Aaron shook his head, his voice soft but unbreakable. I am hurt because I chose to stand. And I would stand again. The widow's hands trembled as she tied the bandage. She could no longer hide the truth from herself. This man was not like her people. He did not see her as cursed. He saw her as someone worth protecting. Still, the whispers grew stronger outside. The elders called her shameful, warning that punishment would come. She was torn between fear of her people and the kindness of the human. But when she looked at her child, smiling for the first time in years, she knew. Trust was no longer a choice, it was already planted deep inside her heart. And though she still feared what the future would bring, for the first time she began to believe, perhaps humanity was different. Perhaps humanity would never abandon them. Humanity's promise. The wound on Aaron's arm healed slowly, but his presence around the widow and her child never weakened. He brought food, shared stories of Earth, and even taught the boy how to laugh without fear. Yet outside their small shelter, the storm of hatred grew. The elders of Vera called meetings, speaking with sharp voices. They declared the widow had broken sacred law by trusting a human. They warned that punishment would come if she did not cast him away. The widow trembled when she heard these words. Her people had always despised her, but now their anger was fire. She sat with Aaron in silence, staring at the flickering lamp in the dark room. They will come for me, she whispered. They will come for my child. Aaron's eyes burned with steady light. They will not take you, they will not take him, he said firmly. The widow shook her head, tears running down her face. You are only one man. You cannot stop them all. Aaron leaned closer, his voice steady. I am human, and humanity does not leave family behind. The next day, the threat became real. Armed guards came to the market, shouting for the widow to appear. They ordered her to stand before the council. The crowd gathered, eager to see her humiliation. Aaron stepped beside her, his presence shocking the people. This is not your fight, human, the guard growled. Aaron stood tall, his jaw set. It became my fight the moment I heard her cry, he answered. The guards raised their weapons, but before blood could be spilled, the sky above trembled. A shadow moved across the city. Vast and dark, every head turned upward, and fear filled the air. A massive Terran warship broke through the clouds, its hull glowing with power. Its engines roared like thunder. Shaking the very ground, the people of Vera gasped, their voices breaking into panic. A human fleet, they whispered. They have come here. The warship hovered above, and a voice echoed across the city through comms. This is the Terran Federation. We have received the call of one of our own. The widow stared in shock, her heart racing. Aaron touched her shoulder gently. I told you. Humanity answers, he whispered. Soldiers of Vera lowered their weapons, their courage broken by the sight. No one dared to challenge the might of a Terran dreadnought. The crowd scattered, whispers filling the air. The humans defend a widow. They treat her like one of their own. The elders stood frozen, powerless before the foreign power above. Moments later, a shuttle descended, its ramp opening in the marketplace. Terran officers in dark armor stepped forward. The leader, a captain with silver hair, looked straight at Aaron. You are the one who sent the signal of need. The captain asked. Aaron nodded, but then he pointed at the widow and her child. No, it was her voice, her plea, he said. And I answered. The captain turned his eyes to the widow, his face calm but strong. You are under the protection of the Terran Federation now, he declared. The widow's knees weakened, her child clutching at her cloak. She could not believe what she was hearing. She had been cursed, rejected, unwanted by her own kind. But now an entire human fleet had crossed the stars for her. Tears spilled from her eyes as she whispered, Why would you do this for me? The captain's voice was steady, echoing through the silent crowd. Because to us family is sacred, and no child, no mother, no widow will ever be abandoned. The people of Vera lowered their heads, fear and shame heavy in their silence. The widow looked at Aaron, her heart overflowing with emotion. She had lived years as a shadow, forgotten, despised, but in one moment, humanity had lifted her from the dust. Her child, once doomed to hunger, now stood protected by the strongest fleet in the galaxy. Aaron placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You are not unwanted, he whispered again. You are one of us now. The child pressed close to Aaron, whispering in a soft voice, Father. The single word broke what was left of the widow's fear. She pressed her hand to her lips, tears falling freely, and for the first time in her life she believed. Perhaps the stars had always been listening. Perhaps they had been waiting for humanity to arrive. Above, the Terran warship remained like a silent guardian, its lights glowing against the broken skies of Vera. And for the widow and her child, the promise of humanity was clear. They would never be abandoned again. The marriage of worlds, the Terran warship hovered above Vera like a silent protector. The widow walked through the market no longer as a shadow, but under the shield of humanity. Her child clung to her side, safe for the first time in his short life. Yet whispers followed them, not of curses, but of disbelief. How can it be, the people murmured. The humans honor her. Aaron stayed close to her, carrying supplies given by the Terran officers. Everywhere he walked, eyes followed him, some filled with fear, some with awe. He had become more than just a stranger. He was the symbol of something new. But to the widow, he was not a symbol. He was the man who had listened, the man who had stood, and in her heart, a quiet truth began to bloom. This human had given her more than protection. He had given her dignity one evening. Under the pale sky of Vera, Aaron sat outside her shelter. The child slept beside his mother, wrapped warmly for the first time in years. The widow stepped out, her eyes tired but softer than before. You have risked everything for us, she whispered. Why? Aaron looked at the stars above, his voice calm. Because life is worth protecting. Because love is worth giving. The widow's lips trembled, her heart fighting against the chains of fear. She had been told she was cursed, unwanted, doomed to live alone. But here was a man who looked at her not with pity, not with disdain, but with respect. For a long time she was silent, then softly she said, No one has ever spoken to me this way. The next day the Terran captain visited. He looked at the widow and her child, then at Aaron. You have chosen, the captain said, his voice steady. In our records, you stand as a guardian already, but humanity asks more. We ask commitment. Aaron turned to the widow. His heart pounding, he knelt before her, not as a soldier, not as a savior, but as a man. I do not offer you pity, he said, his voice trembling with honesty. I offer you my life, my name, my people, and my love. The widow's breath caught. The crowd around them gasped. Never in their history had anyone seen such a thing. A human asking for the hand of an alien widow. Her people muttered in shock, some with anger, some with shame. But the widow looked at her child. Then back at Aaron, she saw not a stranger, but a man who had bled for them. A man who had brought hope. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, Yes. The crowd erupted in voices, disbelief and fear. But above them, the Terran warship sent a signal. A celebration echoed from orbit. Music played across the comms. Humanity's message was clear. Love was greater than species, greater than fear. The marriage was simple, yet powerful in human tradition. Two stood together. Bound by promise, not by bloodlines, Aaron placed a ring of silver on her finger, her trembling hand closing around his. The widow wept openly, not from sorrow, but from release. Her child clung to Aaron's leg, smiling with joy. The captain declared in front of all, From this day she is not unwanted. She is Terran family. The galaxy would remember this day. For in that moment, two worlds touched. A union formed not by treaties or war, but by compassion and choice. The nobles of Vera watched in silence, their pride broken by humanity's courage, their laws of shame shattered by one man's act of love. Whispers spread across the stars. If humanity can love the unwanted, what else are they capable of? The widow stood taller now, her eyes bright for the first time in years. She no longer walked with shame, no longer bowed her head. Her child laughed, calling Aaron father with pride, and together they stood as a family born not of blood but of humanity's promise. The Terran fleet lit the skies above with signals of celebration. Their message was clear to every world that watched. Humanity does not abandon, humanity embraces. And so the widow, once rejected by all, became a wife, a mother, and a symbol, a living proof that love knows no borders. And humanity, the race once underestimated, showed the galaxy what true strength was, not only in war but in the power of the heart. A family forever. The skies of Vera glowed with the lights of the Terran fleet. For the widow and her child, life had changed forever. No longer were they shadows hiding in the alleys. No longer were they cursed whispers in the market. They were now embraced by humanity, carried under its promise of family and dignity. The days that followed were filled with wonder. The widow walked through the streets with Aaron at her side, her child running ahead with laughter. The same people who once spat at her now lowered their eyes, unable to meet her gaze, for they had seen what humanity had done. They had seen how the Terrans answered one cry in the dark, and they could no longer deny it. The cursed widow was now guarded by the strongest force in the galaxy. On board the Terran ship, life felt like a dream. The widow's child played with human children, laughing as if he had always belonged. He learned words in English, his small voice bright with joy. The widow watched him, her eyes shining with tears. Once she feared he would die hungry, forgotten by her own kind. Now he ran free under the care of an entire fleet, and she whispered to herself, "He is safe. He is home." Aaron never left her side. He guided her through human customs, showing her their ways, their traditions, but he also listened to her stories, honoring her culture, respecting her past. Together, they built something new, something neither human nor alien, but both. When he called her my wife, her heart trembled with joy. When the child called him father, Aaron's eyes filled with pride. They were not just three souls surviving. They were a family. News spread across the galaxy. Worlds whispered about the human who married a widow that no one wanted. Some mocked, some feared, but many began to hope. Alien mothers who had lost their husbands looked to the stars, asking, "Will the humans hear us too?" And slowly, the story of the widow and the human became more than a tale. It became a symbol that humanity's greatest strength was not only its weapons, but its heart. One evening, the widow stood on the observation deck of the Terran ship. The stars stretched endlessly before her. She held her child's hand, Aaron standing tall beside them. Her heart remembered the days of cold nights and cruel whispers. She remembered when she believed the stars had abandoned her. But now she knew the truth. The stars had not abandoned her. They had brought her to humanity. Aaron wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his voice soft. "You will never walk in shadows again." The widow leaned into him, her child smiling up at them both for the first time. She felt not only safe but proud. Proud to stand beside a human. Proud to be part of his people. Proud to have a future she had once thought impossible. The galaxy watched and learned on Vera. The elders who once cursed her now stayed silent. Even they could not fight against the proof before their eyes. For humanity had shown them something greater than fear. It had shown them love. In the years to come, songs would be sung. Stories would be told of the widow who was unwanted by all, until one human crossed the stars and made her his family, and those stories would spread. Carried on ships, whispered in marketplaces, they would remind the galaxy that compassion could be stronger than war. That even in the darkest of times, humanity would always answer. On that night, as the stars burned bright, the widow held her child close. Aaron placed his hand over hers, steady and strong, and together they whispered the truth that had become their life. No alien wanted the widow, but humanity embraced her and her child forever.